Science Journal for Kids and Teens presents How Does Your Address Affect Your Chances of Being Evicted? Read by Miranda Wilson. Abstract. The idea of losing your home is scary. If a renter struggles to pay their landlord, the landlord may start the legal process of eviction. The renter has the opportunity to present their case in court, but they typically must show up in person and on time. And if they don't, in some places, the landlord will receive a default judgment. This allows them to move forward with the eviction. We wondered about renters traveling to the courthouse using public transportation. Does their travel time affect their probability of receiving a default judgment? We studied 200,000 eviction cases across 15 years in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We found that renters with longer travel times to the courthouse are more likely to receive a default judgment in favor of their landlord. But this effect was not present during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is because renters could attend their court hearing virtually via video call. Our findings show that the location and accessibility of a courthouse can affect the outcomes of individual cases. Introduction. Evictions happen when a landlord forces people to move from the property they are renting. Most evictions occur when renters cannot or do not pay their rent. In recent years, the cost of rent, along with food and other necessities, has increased. This has made it more difficult for people to afford to pay their monthly housing bills. When a person fails to pay rent or otherwise breaks the terms of their lease, the landlord may file an eviction notice with the court. Then, a date is set for the landlord and renter to appear in court and present their cases. If the renter is not present in court on time, the result in many places is a default judgment in favor of the landlord. A default judgment means that the landlord automatically wins the case, and the renter can no longer dispute what the landlord has said. Many cases in housing court result in default judgments, which then lead to evictions. We wanted to investigate the role of transportation to court in default judgments. Many renters depend on public transportation, such as buses and subway trains, to get around. We wondered if the time it takes to travel to the courthouse impacts the likelihood of a default judgment against them. Here is a map of the United States showing Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where this study was conducted. The inset shows where Philadelphia is within the state of Pennsylvania, indicated by a red marker. Methods. We studied approximately 200,000 eviction cases in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania from 2005 to 2021. Out of these, nearly 40% of renters facing eviction received a default judgment when they did not appear in court. Then, they were ordered to leave their residences. We used Google Maps to estimate how long it would take each renter to travel from home to the courthouse via public transportation. We also looked at public records to determine whether each case ended in a default judgment. We had to consider other factors that might impact the relationship between travel time and default judgments. These confounders included demographic characteristics of the landlords and renters. We also considered the socioeconomic characteristics of different neighborhoods. We developed a statistical model to estimate the effect of a change in travel time. It accounted for the potential confounders. Then, we looked at how well our data from Philadelphia fit the model. Finally, we studied default judgments in two different negative control samples. These were where we thought commuting time would not affect default judgments. One negative control sample was eviction cases after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. These happened via video calls. Another was in part of the court system that considered the cases of tenants in public housing. In these cases, rules governing default judgments were more friendly to tenants. Results. We found that longer travel time to the courthouse increased the likelihood of a default judgment. Every 10 minutes of extra travel time increased the probability that the renter would be late and receive a default judgment by about 1.4%. As we expected, travel time was not an issue during the COVID-19 pandemic when many cases happened via video calls. Nor was it an issue for public housing tenants. This reassured us that we had not forgotten an important confounder that would have had an effect on our results. Here in Figure 1, you can see the relationship between travel time to the courthouse and the probability of a default judgment in favor of the landlord. The points on the graph represent averages from approximately 200,000 eviction cases. In the graph, the x-axis represents travel time to the courthouse in minutes, and the y-axis represents the probability of a default judgment. The blue line in the graph shows the trend. Looking at the graph, what happens to the probability of a default judgment as renters' travel time to the courthouse increases? Discussion. Our findings show that transportation has a big effect on individual eviction cases in Philadelphia, but we believe the effect may be even broader. We carried out further research in Houston, Texas, and found similar results. Future studies should therefore investigate the issue of travel time in other cities. They could also look at other types of legal cases. There are steps we can take so that justice is accessible to everyone, no matter how far they live from the courthouse. Courts could allow more flexible scheduling of cases. Remote hearings via video call would be an option as an alternative to in-person hearings. Reducing the number of evictions should be a goal for policymakers. The current eviction crisis in the U.S. hurts more than just the people losing their homes. The lack of affordable housing strains the nation's healthcare system, courts, schools, and local governments. Studying the causes and consequences of evictions will give us tools to better understand and fight the eviction crisis. Conclusion. In the U.S., the goal is to have equal justice for all, but there are many factors that may make it more difficult for some people to access justice. Transportation time via public transport may be one of these challenges. Find out where your nearest courthouse is and work out how long it would take you to travel there via public transit. Can you think of any other reasons why some people may have a harder time getting to court or receiving a favorable judgment? How could policymakers adjust the system to make it more fair and equal? Thank you for listening to this recording. This work has been adapted from the original peer-reviewed paper in the journal PNAS, published on January 3, 2023. Research conducted by David Hoffman and Anton Strezhnev from the University of Pennsylvania School of Law and the Department of Political Science at the University of Chicago, respectively. Please visit our website, sciencejournalforkids.org, for more free science teaching resources.